Okay. Sorry, I forgot to... There's a thing you have to do with the camera to... It's really dumb. Okay. Now we're back on the right one. I've kind of forgotten the plot of everything that we've read so far. A little bit. So... Hi! It's OBS, virtual camera. Every time I go live with YouTube, it tries to go through OBS for some reason, which doesn't work, and I have to kind of manually change the camera sort of on and off again, and I forgot. So, whoops, I have to delete that one. Never mind. Yeah, computers. They're good, but sometimes you just kind of want the days when you could just look at a thing and know what it was. You could be like, that's an apple. That's a door. I know what wood is, definitely. But now it's like there's space, but there's also molecules. It's very hard to understand anything. I'm not even trying. Flora's sitting on the Welcome to the Shit Show background banner. Aren't you, buddy? She's on brand. So, hello everybody. How are you today? Me, I'm fine. I know I have to talk to my pharmacist tomorrow and try and get all my meds to line up. So that's going to be a headache, but it's not happening right now. You coming here, sweetie? Do you want the people to see you? You do want the people to see you. Hey, Thunder Jim. Whoa. Oh, this is Anthony Fawkes. And I am the Scarlet Pimpernel. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. She's been really happy today. Not quite sure why. She's almost had polite hands the entire time. That's what I call it when her claws are not out and digging into my actual body. Isn't it right? Isn't it right? It's very wholesome. Okay, so we've been reading the Scarlet Pimpernel. And what is that? Doesn't matter. Basically, the evil revolutionaries who we're not supposed to sympathize with because they're so evil and they hate nice people. They have a plan to catch Le Scarlet Pimpernel. They're going to arrest a family of aristocrats where the people are like a hot girl and a really old man and like some sick children, or just something to make the Scarlet Pimpernel feel sympathy, which is something that revolutionaries don't feel. It's not a revolutionary ideal to have empathy for your fellow man, apparently. I'm not sure it's an aristocratic ideal to have empathy. But then again, this was written by a baroness, so... Oh yeah. Hi, Josh. It really is, but we just got to go with it. We got to go with it and laugh at it, So yeah, the evil revolutionaries. Lozé and his friend Chauvelin. Chauvelin is the Pimpernel's like main enemy. So they've come up with this plot to arrest a very sympathetic family, and actually the carriage transporting them will be full of revolutionary soldiers. And the family as well. I don't know how big this is going to be. Hey, Danny. I mean, nowadays we know that revolution and wealth redistribution is really good. We do. Flora doesn't agree. She hates it when the other cats get food, get to come inside, you know. Yes, you are an aristo pig. Yes, you are. She didn't like that. I think we're all pretty much here. How many people did we have last time? It was like 5, right? That's basically it, apart from earlier in the story, everyone was trying to figure out who the Scarlet Pimpernel was, and they were telling stories about how great he was and how he rescued this other aristocratic family. And yeah, they were telling them at a ball, well, a soiree of some kind, being hosted by Sir Percy Blakeney, English aristocrat, fop, and basically Bruce Wayne to the Scarlet Pimpernel's Batman. And he pulled an extreme power move while they were telling stories about how great the Scarlet Pimpernel is by just sloping off to a chaise longue and falling asleep. Oh no, she wanted Napoleon to become emperor, didn't you? Oh. Flora doesn't think anyone but her should have the vote. She doesn't know what a vote is, but it's the principle of the thing. Said 11 last time. Wow. Did not notice that. Oh, I should post again. Where go? Oops. Where go? Get it in. Oh man, that's not good. Flora's on my arm. We'll give him a couple of minutes. Yeah, Holly is very sure of her place in the world. Hi, Nick. I'll still be going in a little while. It went to like an hour hour and a half last time. I'm not following you around and only streaming when you're not like able to watch. It's just a level of focus that I don't have. I think, yeah. I'll try and read really slowly. Go. Story number 1. Part 4. Oh, alert came up on my phone and went away instantly. That's cool. Why can't we implement that? Alright, so Lose and Chauvelin have this plan. They've arrested the Aristo family. They're ready. Part 4. The following day was market day in Moisson, and at first Lose had been doubtful whether it would not be best to wait another 24 hours before carrying through his friend Chauvelin's project. The dawn, however, broke with ideal conditions for it. A leaden sky, a tearing wind, and torrents of rain, alternating with a thin drizzle. Thank you. It's the slowest any New Zealander has ever said anything. On the whole, nature had ranged herself on the side of all those who worked their nefarious deeds under cover of semi-darkness. Lose, gazing out on the mournful autumnal aspect of weather and sky, felt that if the Scarlet Pimpernel did indeed meditate mischief, he would choose such a day as this. Thus it was that in the early dawn of this market day, the citizens of Moisson had a sad scene to witness. Soon after 7 o'clock, a small crowd collected around the big, old-fashioned diligence which had drawn up outside the Desez house in the Rue des Pipots. It's a lot of There's a lot of French in this. It's not. It's just tragic, really. I thought Brexit was gonna. Sorry, I know you hate Brexit. I'm sorry. Just don't mention it in front of her. To right and left of the vehicle were soldiers on horseback, 2 on each side mounting guard, and the man who held the reins was also in the uniform of the rural gendarmerie. Everyone in the city knew this man. Charles Marie was his name, and he had begun life as a baker's assistant, a weak, anemic-looking youth who had been sent out of the army because he was no use as a fighting man, so timorous and slow-witted was he. This is like the first soy boy straw man. Lately he had obtained a position as ostler at the posting inn in Mont, because it seems he did know something about horses. But why he should have been chosen to drive the diligence to Paris today, nobody could conjecture. He must have had a friend in high places to be so exalted above his capabilities. Anyway, there he sat on the box, looking neither to right nor left, but straight between the ears of his off-leader, and not a word would he say in response to the questions, the jeers, and the taunts which came to him from his friends in the crowd. I love the Baroness really making sure we know what a loser this guy is. Soon, however, excitement centered around the porte cochere of the Desairs house. The garage. Well, that's what they... You know what I mean. It had suddenly been thrown wide open, and in the doorway appeared poor Citizeness Desairs, escorted by 2 officers of the gendarmerie, and closely followed by Madeleine, her little daughter, also under guard. He was. It was pitiable to see the poor invalid, who could scarcely stand on her half-paralyzed limbs, thus being dragged away from her home where she had lived as a happy wife and mother for close on a quarter of a century. Well, the people outside her gates starved, but that's not actually... That must have been edited out at some point. A murmur of sympathy for the 2 women, and of execration for the brutality of this arrest, rose from the crowd. But it was quickly enough suppressed. Who would dare to murmur openly these days, when spies of the revolutionary government lurked at every street corner? It's like reading anti-Antifa propaganda. Hostile glances, however, were shot at Citizen Lozay, who had come over that morning from Mont and now stood by, somewhat detached from the crowd, watching the proceedings in the company of his friend, Chauvelin. "Is this in accordance with your idea?" he asked in a whisper, when presently Chauvelin completed a quick and comprehensive examination of the diligence. Remember, this is Chauvelin's plan to trick the Scarlet Pimpernel into trying to rescue them, but the coach is going to be full of guards. Chauvelin's only reply was a curt and peremptory "Hush!" and a furtive glance about him to see that there were no likely eavesdroppers within hearing. He knew from experience that the famous League of the Scarlet Pimpernel also had spies lurking in every corner. Spies not so numerous, perhaps, as those in the pay of the Committee of Public Safety, but a great deal more astute. And he also knew, none better, that the case of the Desairs family was just one that would appeal to the sporting or chivalrous instincts of that band of English adventurers. But he was satisfied with the mise en scène organized, under his supervision, by Chief of Section Lozay. Prominence had been given all over the department to the arrest of the Desairs family, to the worth and integrity of its head, the sickness of the wife, the charm and modesty of the daughter. I like a little bit of mime in my stories. 6 picked men of the gendarmerie of Mont, armed to the teeth, would join the diligence at Mont, but they would ride inside, disguised as passengers, whilst it was left for anybody to see that the coach was travelling under a feeble guard of 4 men, an officer and 3 troopers. and was driven by a lout who was known to have no fight in him. Seems like they've gone a little bit overboard, but, well, underboard. Losey had been inspired when he chose this day. A typical day in late October, when that pitiless rain lashed by a southeasterly wind that would score the roads and fret the horses. Down in the forest, the diligence would have to go almost at foot pace, for the outline of every tree on the roadside would be blurred, and objects would loom like ghosts out of the mist. Yes, the scene was well set for the comedy invented by Chauvelin for the capture of his archenemy. It only remained for the principal actors to play their roles to his satisfaction. Already, the female prisoners had been hustled into the diligence amidst the sighs and tears of their sympathizers in the crowd. Poor Madame de Sez had sunk, half fainting with exhaustion, into the arms of her young daughter, and the two women sat huddled in the extreme corner of the vehicle, more dead than alive. Mise en place better than mise en scène. Who's to say? I just like a mise, I don't care what kind. I know, it's overboard, right? Yeah. Having said that, I don't really blame the aristocratic women, because it's not like they could go around doing charity. Oh wait, they absolutely could. Yeah, they could have. Yeah. Allons, citoyens. Blah blah. And now, amidst much jolting and creaking, some shouting and cursing too, with cracking of whip and jingling of spurs, the awkward, lumbering diligence was started on its way. Some 200 meters further on, it came to a halt once more outside the commissariat, and here the male prisoner, Citizen de Sez himself, was made to join his family in the airless, creaking vehicle. Resigned to his own fate, he set himself the task of making the painful journey as endurable as may be to his invalid wife. Hardly realizing yet the extent of their misfortune and the imminence of their doom, the three victims of Losey's cupidity and Chauvelin's vengeance suffered their martyrdom in silence and with resignation. Yeah, I get it. You love the aristos and you want to kiss them. The final start from Moisson had been made at 8 o'clock. By this time, the small city was filling with the neighbouring farmers and drovers, with their cattle and their carts and vehicles of every kind, all tending either to the Place du Marche or to the various taverns for refreshment. Losey, accompanied by Chauvelin, had ridden back to Mantes. Just before 9 o'clock, the diligence rattled over the cobblestones of that city, and a halt was called at a posting inn. It was part of the programme to spend some hours in Mantes, where the extra men of the gendarmerie would be picked up, and only to make a fresh start when the shades of evening were beginning to draw in. It was not to be supposed that the English brigands would launch their attack in broad daylight, and the weather did not look as if it were going to mend. Chauvelin, of course, was there, seeing to every arrangement, with his friend Losey close at his elbow. He had himself picked out the 6 men of the gendarmerie who were to ride in disguise inside the diligence. He had inspected their disguises, added an artistic or realistic touch here and there, before he pronounced them to be good. I'm just imagining a bunch of soldiers dressed up like Marie Antoinette. Except they've still kind of got their revolutionary hats on, like the red hats, and then the big white wig on top. Finally, he turned to the young officer who was in command of the party. Now, he said very earnestly to him, you know just what you are going to do? You realize the importance of the mission which is being entrusted to you. The officer nodded in reply. He was a young man and ambitious. The task which had been allotted to him had fired his enthusiasm. Indeed, in these days, the capture of that elusive English spy known as the Scarlet Pimpernel was a goal for which every young officer of the gendarmerie was wont to strive. not only because of the substantial monetary reward in prospect, but because of the glory attached to the destruction of so bitter an enemy of revolutionary France. I love this, yeah. I will tell you, citizen, the young man said to Chauvelin, how I have finally laid my plans. You shall tell me if you approve. About a kilometre and a half before the road emerges out of the wood, the ground rises gradually, and there are one or two sharp bends in the road until it reaches the crest of the hill. That part of the forest is very lonely, and at a point just before the ground begins to rise, I intend to push my mount on for a metre or two ahead of the men and pretend to examine the leaders of the team. After a while, I will call halt and make as if I thought there was something wrong with the traces. The driver is such a lout that he and I will embark on a long argument as to what he should do to remedy the defect, and in the course of the argument, I will contrive to slip a small piece of flint which I have in my pocket under the hoof of one of the coach horses. You don't think one of your men will see you doing that, and perhaps wonder, oh, I can be careful. It is done in a moment. Then we shall get on the road again, and 5 minutes later that same coach horse will be dead lame. Another halt for examination, this time near the crest of the hill. The lout of a driver will never discover what is amiss. I shall make as if the hurt was serious, and set myself the task of tending it. I thought then, subject to your approval, of ordering the troopers to dismount. I've provided them with good wine and certain special rations in their knapsacks. At a word from me, they will rest by the roadside, seemingly heedless and unconcerned, but really very wide awake and keen on the scent. The diligence will the while be at a standstill, with doors shut and curtains closely drawn, but the 6 men whom we have stowed inside the coach are keen on their work, well armed, and like hungry wolves eager to get their teeth into the enemies of France. They will be on the alert, their hands on their pistols, ready to spring up and out of the coach at the first sign of an attack. Now, what think you of that setting, citizen? The young officer concluded, for luring the English spies into a fight. Their methods are usually furtive, but this time they will have to meet us in hand-to-hand combat, and if they fall into our trap, I know that we can deal with them. I like the concept of Robin Hood, but I don't like being the target. But I do it in reverse. Yeah. Excuse me, I maim this horse. I'm the good guy. Yeah, I think. See, my opinion of the plan is, why are they just coming up with it now? I thought everything was meticulously arranged. I can but pronounce your plan admirable, citizen captain, Chauvelin replied approvingly. You have my best wishes for your success. In the meanwhile, Citizen Lozay and I will be anxiously waiting for news. We'll make a start soon after you and strike the bridle path through the forest. This gives us the shortcut which will bring us to Epony. I don't know how to say it in French. Just in time to hear your news. If you have been attacked, send me a courier thither as soon as you have the English spy securely bound and gagged inside the coach. I will not fail you, citizen, the young captain rejoined eagerly. Okay. Give me 2 seconds. It's very exciting, isn't it? 2 seconds. Here I am. Here I am. Sorry. There's a new villain on the loose, Pimpernel. Here's his calling card. You handed me nothing. They call him the Mime. The plan would be very good if the young captain is the Pimpernel. He probably is. I don't know. I don't remember any of these people could be Le Pimpernel Scarlet. Yes, I have. What made you bring that up? The wasp with the bazonkas is hilarious. I love that it exists. Lozé, who stood by, anxious and silent whilst this colloquy was going on, shrugged his shoulders with a show of philosophy. And at worst, he said, if that meddlesome Scarlet Pimpernel should think prudence the better part of valour, if he should scent a trap and carefully avoid it, we would always have the satisfaction of sending the Desez family to the guillotine. That's a good thing to see, opening Twitter. The English spies, Chauvelin rejoined dryly, will not scent a trap, nor will they give up the attempt to rescue the Desez family. This is just a case to rouse their ire against us, and if it proves successful, one to flatter their vanity and redound to their credit in their own country. No, he went on thoughtfully, I have no fear that the Scarlet Pimpernel will evade us this time. He will attack, I know. The only question is, when he does, are we sufficiently prepared to defeat him? I feel like the road from Moisson to Paris is probably pretty well known. And that whole day that they take in the other town kind of seems like, I mean, if your soldiers are in disguise anyway, how would you know if they were swapped out for different guys? This is just my prediction. I don't actually remember anything. But that's the second thing to occur to me. The first thing is, yeah, you're leaving this really late. With the half-dozen excellent men whom I have picked up here in Mont, the young officer retorted. Ooh, well done you. I shall have 9 under my command, and we are prepared for the attack. It is the English spies who will be surprised, we who will hold the advantage, even as to numbers, for the Scarlet Pimpernel can only work with 2 or 3 followers, and we shall outnumber them 3 to 1. Then good luck attend you, citizen captain, Chauvelin said at last. You are in a fair way of rendering your country a signal service. See that you let not fame and fortune evade you in the end. Remember that you will have to deal with one of the most astute, as well as one of the most daring adventurers of our times, who has baffled men that were cleverer and at least as ambitious as yourself. He's also hot, and I heard his dong is crazy. What number you? 3. Hi, Josh. They're setting a trap for Le Pimpernel Scarlet. Stay, the terrorist added, this is Chauvelin, and placed his thin, claw-like hand, as if in warning, on the other man's arm. It is impossible, even for me, who knows him as he is and who has seen him in scores of disguises, to give you any accurate description of his personality. But one thing you can bear in mind is that he is tall above the average, tall even for an Englishman, and his height is the one thing about him that he cannot disguise. So beware of every man who is taller than yourself, citizen captain. However innocent he may appear, take the precaution to detain him. Mistrust every tall man, for one of them is of a surety the Scarlet Pimpernel. He finally reminded the young captain to send him a courier with the welcome news as soon as possible. Citizen Lozé and I, he concluded, will ride by the bridle path and await you at Epinay. I shall be devoured with anxiety until I hear from you. Part 5. Sip. Without the French Revolution, would we even have Pepsi? I doubt it. The men were not nervous, not at first. They were merely excited, knowing what awaited them, both during the journey and afterwards by way of reward. If they were successful, there would be for every man engaged in the undertaking a sufficiency to provide for himself and his family for the rest of his life. The capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Half a dozen magic words in truth, and they had spurred citizen Captain Raffet and his squad with boundless enthusiasm. They felt no discomfort either from tearing wind or driving rain. With eyes fixed before them, they rode on, striving to pierce the mist-laden distance where the enemy of France was even now lurking, intent on that adventure which would be his last. I feel like I needed to read very dramatically because everything here is just so breathless with intrigue and excitement. It was long past 5 o'clock when the diligence with its escort reached the edge of the forest. What little daylight there had been all afternoon was already beginning to wane. The sky was of a leaden colour, heavily laden with rain clouds, save way behind in the west, where a few fiery crimson streaks cut through the clouds like sharp incisions. There, where the setting sun still lingered in the autumn sky. The men now were keenly on the alert, their eyes searching the dim light that glimmered through the forest trees, their ears attuned to the slightest sound that rose above the patter of their horses' hoofs, or the grinding of the coach wheels over the muddy road. The forest between Messières and Epernay is 4 kilometres long. The road which intersects it plunges down into the valley and then rises up again with 1 or 2 sharp bends to the crest of the hill, after which, within the space of 200 yards, the forest trees quickly become sparse, and the open country lies spread out like a map, with, on the right, the ribbon of the Seine winding its way along to Saint-Germain and Paris. I cannot stop saying France, and if that bothers you, probably leave now because it's not going to get any better. It'll probably get worse. The leaden colour laden with rain. I like the writing, it's just so excited the whole time. The writing loves what's happening. It was in the forest that the enemy would lurk. Out in the open he could find no cover, and would be sighted a couple of kilometres all round and more, if he attempted one of his audacious tricks. The light, which became more and more fitful as the sun sank lower in the west, made observation difficult. The thicket to right and left of the road looked like a dark impenetrable wall, from behind which, mayhap, dozens of pairs of eyes were peering, ready to attack. How do you get attacked by an eyeball? Lame. The men who were riding by the side of the coach felt queer sensations at the roots of their hair. Their hands, moist and hot, clung convulsively to the reins, and the glances which they cast about them became furtive and laden with fear. I also hope he pants as a soldier. All of them! It's too late, I've seen everything. But those who were inside the diligence had no superstitious terrors to contend with. The aristos were huddled up together in the far corner of the vehicle, and the men had spread themselves out, 3 aside, as comfortably as they could. A couple of bottles of excellent wine had been a welcome supplement to their rations, and put additional heart into them. One of them had produced a pack of greasy, well-worn cards from his pocket, with which to while away the time. The woods are full of beholders. Yeah, I've noticed that, Danny. Well, these guys are probably having queer sensations in their hair because the sexy and audacious Scarlet Pimpernel is somewhere nearby. It's probably why their hands are all hot. A quarter of an hour later, the captain in command called a halt. The jolting vehicle came to a standstill with a jerk, and there was much scrambling and creaking and jingling while the driver got down from his seat to see what was amiss. Nothing much, apparently. For a minute or two later, the diligence was once more on its way. Soon there was an appreciable slackening of speed, and then a halt. More shouting and swearing, creaking and scrambling. The men inside marveled what was amiss. It was as much as their lives were worth to put their heads out of the window, or even to draw one of the tattered blinds to one side in order to peep. But they quickly put cards and wine away. It was better to be prepared for the word of command, which might come now at any moment. Yeah, queer sensations. I saw queer sensations in this I think it was at Governor's in like 2002. The joke is that queer sensations would be a really good name for a band. It's not a good joke. Governor's was not a good pub. So my spy detector is erect. Sir, it's happened again. They strained their ears to listen, and one by one, a word or two, a movement, a sound, told them what was happening. Their comrades outside were ordered to dismount, to take it easy, to sit down by the roadside and rest. It seemed one of the draft horses had gone lame. The men who were inside sighed with a longing for rest too, a desire to stretch their cramped limbs, but they did not murmur. They were waiting for the word of command that would release them from their inactivity. Till then, there was nothing to do but to wait. No doubt this halt by the roadside was just a part of the great scheme for luring the English adventurers to the attack. Grimly and in silence, the 6 picked men inside the coach drew their pistols from their wallets, saw that they were primed and in order, and then laid them across their knees with their fingers on the triggers, in readiness for the Englishmen when they came. Oh yeah, I'm sure that's how the cards got greasy. Damn, I can't believe that the revolutionary soldiers and the family of aristos didn't spend that journey reaching across the aisle and outside of their snowflake bubbles to exchange views. It's like the aristos are completely deplatformed, and that's so sad. They should be replatformed. Because a scaffold is a kind of platform, right? Talking about the people in the book. It was not everybody at Moisson who sympathized with the Desez family when they were arrested. There were all the envious, the dissatisfied, the ambitious, the Bernie bros, as well as the ragtag and bobtail of the district who had linked their fortunes with the revolutionary government and who looked for their own advancement by loudly proclaiming their loyalty to its decrees. There's no one who thinks that maybe everyone should have bread. That's ridiculous. Oh yeah, they probably shot the horse as well. For such as these, the Desez family, with their well-known integrity, their wealth, and unostentatious piety, were just a set of aristos whom the principles of the glorious revolution condemned as traitors to the state and to the people. I mean, are they not? And on market days, Moisson was always full of such people. They were noisy and they were aggressive. And while the sympathizers with the Desez family, after they had waved a last farewell toward the fast disappearing diligence, went quietly about their business or returned silently to their homes, the others thought this a good opportunity for airing some of those sentiments which would be reported in influential quarters if any government spy happened to be within earshot. Platform issues are scaffolding. In spite of the persistent bad weather, men congregated in and about the marketplace during the intervals of business and lustily discussed the chief event of the day. There was much talk of Citizen Lozay, whom everyone had known as a young, out-at-the-elbows ragamuffin in the employ of Hector Desez, and who now had power of life and death over the very man who had been his master. This is supposed to mean that he's like a Judas who's betrayed the guy who treated him very kindly, but I think it's probably good. Be it noted that Losey appeared to have very few friends among the crowd of drovers and shepherds and the farmers who came in with their produce from the outlying homesteads. With advancement in life had come arrogance in the man, and a perpetual desire to assert his authority over those with whom he had fraternized in the past. He's a dickhead. Those, however, who had their homes in the immediate neighbourhood of Mont dared not say much, for Losey was feared almost as much as he was detested. But the strangers who had come into Moisson with their cattle and their produce were free enough with their tongues. Rumour had gone far afield about this arrest of the Desires family, and many there were who asserted that mysterious undercurrents were at work in the affair, undercurrents that would draw citizen Losey up on the crest of a tidal wave to the giddy heights of incredible fortune. Nay, more! There were many who positively asserted that in some unexplainable way, the whole of the Desires affair was connected with the capture of the English spy known throughout France as the Scarlet Pimpernel. The spy had been at work in the district some time. Everyone knew that it was he who had dragged those ci-devant traitors and aristos, the tournants d'Agenais, out of citizen Losey's clutches, and citizen Losey was now having his revenge. He would capture the Scarlet Pimpernel, catch him in the very act of trying to effect the escape of the Desires family, and thus earn the reward of 10,000 livres offered to any man who would lay that enemy of France by the heels. I don't know how to explain how much 10,000 livres is, but it's like a lot of money. Lucky Losey, thus to have the means of earning a sum of money sufficient to keep a man and his family in affluence for the rest of their lives. And besides the money, there would be glory too. Who could gauge the height to which a man might rise if he brought about the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel? Well, Losey would do it. Lucky Losey. He would certainly do it, asserted some. Those sort of men always have all the luck. There were even those who asserted that the Scarlet Pimpernel was already captured, and that Losey had got him. Lucky, lucky Losey. You don't suppose, one man declared, that anything would be known of the affair unless it was already accomplished. Losey is not one to talk till after a thing is done. No, no, believe me, my friends, Losey has already got his 10,000 livres in his pocket. He was a wizened little old man from over Lannoy way, and now he dolefully shook his head. And to think, he went on, that I might have had that English spy by the heels myself, if I had had a bit of luck like Losey. A shout of derision greeted this astounding assertion. Yeah, just multiply 10,000 of everything by everything else, and then you'll be like, damn, makes you think. You, Papa Sargon, one of the crowd ejaculated with a loud laugh. If you've ever ejaculated with a loud laugh, write and let us know. We'd love to hear your stories. You laying the English spy by the heels? That is the best joke I've heard for many a day. Sucks to be them. Will you tell us how that came about? And Papa Sargon told the tale how he and his wife had a visit from a squad of soldiers who told him that they were after a band of English spies who were known to be in that district. The soldiers asked for a night's shelter, as they were weary after a long day's ride. Papa Sargon remained, oh my god, it's Sargon of Akkad. Papa Sargon remained convinced in his own mind that for the better part of a night he had harboured the most bitter enemies of his country. And if he had only guessed who those supposed soldiers were, he might have informed the local commissary of police and earned 10,000 livres for himself. Now, this story would not perhaps have been altogether convincing to unprejudiced ears, but such as it was, and with everything that had occurred in Moisson these past few days, it aroused considerable excitement. It went to prove that the Scarlet Pimpernel was not nearly so mysterious or so astute as rumour credited him to be, since he almost fell a victim to Papa Sargon. It also went to prove to the satisfaction of the company present that Citizen Lozay had been sharper than Papa Sargon, and having come across the Scarlet Pimpernel through some lucky accident, he had laid hands on him and was even now conveying him to Paris, where a grateful government would hand him over the promised reward of 10,000 livres. I wish I had a sound effects board. Probably best for all of us that I don't. This notion, which gradually filtrated into the minds of the company, did not tend to make Citizen Lozay any more popular. And when presently most of that same company adjourned to Lyons for refreshment, there were some among the younger men who wanted to know why they should not have their share in those 10,000 livres. The Scarlet Pimpernel, they argued, with more enthusiasm than logic, had been captured in their district. The Desez family, who were in some way connected with the capture, were citizens of Moisson. Why should not they, citizens of Moisson too, finger a part of the reward? That's what it says. I had to read out what it says. I mean, I didn't have to. It was all very wild and very illogical, and it would have been impossible for anyone to say definitely who was the prime mover in the ensuing resolution, which, by the way, was carried unanimously, that a deputation should set out forthwith for Mantes to interview Citizen Lozay and demand, in the name of justice and for the benefit of Moisson, some share in the money prize granted by the government for the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Subsequently, both Papa Sargon and a drover from Ancourt were held to be chiefly to blame. But, as Papa Sargon very properly remarked, neither he nor the stranger from Ancourt stood to gain anything by the wild goose chase, so why should they have instigated it? Yeah. Well, the Scarlet Pimpernel is kind of upper class and clever and funny and rude. Oh, sorry. Be that as it may, soon after the midday meal, half a score of young stalwarts climbed into the cart of the drover from Ancourt, and the party, full of enthusiasm and of Leon's excellent red wine, set out for Mantes. It's probably more maroon, but I like the sleeves. They're really good for gesturing with. I'm glad you're here. They haven't actually done the plan yet. There's been a lot of talk. They had provided themselves with a miscellaneous collection of arms. Those who possessed guns brought them along. Then they borrowed a couple of pistols from Leon and 2 more from old Miteau, who had been a soldier in his day. Some of them had sabres. Others took sickles or scythes, which might be useful. One man had a saw. Another took a wood chopper. I read that as wood chipper at first and thought it was very funny. All these things would be very useful should there be a fight over this affair, and most of them hoped that there would be a fight. There has been a lot of pussing around, but I think a lot of it's necessary and important. The first disappointment came on arrival to Mantes. Here at the commissariat, they were informed that Citizen Lozay had been gone these past 2 hours. He had ridden away in the company of his friend who had come from Paris some 2 days previously. The general idea prevalent at the commissariat was that the 2 men had ridden away in the direction of Paris. I'm so happy for them. The second disappointment, a corollary of the first, was that the diligence with prisoners and escort had started on its way less than half an hour ago. It seemed in very truth as if the plot thickened. Lozay and his friend from Paris gone, the diligence gone. No one paused to reflect how this could possibly mean anything in the nature of a plot. But by this time spirits were inflamed. Unaccountably inflamed. Everyone was so poor these days. Money was so terribly hard to earn. Work was so grinding. Remuneration so small. But now the idea of the capture of the English spy with its attendant reward had seized hold of the imagination of these young hotheads, and they clung to it tenaciously, grimly, certain that if they acted quickly and wisely, and if no one else got in the way, they would succeed in gaining the golden prize. A competence. Just think of it. And with nothing to do for it but an exciting adventure. And here was Losey interfering, snatching the prize for himself. Losey, who already drew a large salary from the state for very little work. I'm not sure that opportunities were that much better 4 years before this story starts. But the aristocrats were very kind to their servants sometimes. All this had been talked over, sworn over, discussed, commented at great length, all the way between Moisson and Mantes, in the rickety cart driven by the drover from Ancourt. He was a wise man, that drover. His advice was both sound and bold. I call my piss boy Fitz. He's reasonably happy, I think. The drover from Ancourt. Why? He asked pertinently. Why should a man like Citizen Losey get everything he wants? I say it is because he has a friend over in Paris who comes along and helps him. Because he has money and influence. What? Was there ever anything seen quite so unjust? Where is the English spy, my friend? I ask you. He is in this district. Our district. And what I say is that what's in our district belongs to us. Remember, there's 10,000 livres waiting for every man who takes a hand in the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel. 10,000 livres! And Citizen Losey, with that stranger from Paris, is even at this hour riding away with it in his pocket. Don't know where he's getting 10,000 for every man involved, but the crowd likes it. He spoke a great many more equally eloquent words, for he had a gift of speech, had this drover from Ancourt. A rough fellow, it is true, but one with his heart in the right place, and born in the district too. Anyone could tell that by the contemptuous way with which he spoke of any stranger born outside this corner of Seine-et-Oise. Hope I'm saying it right. To the man who had sat next to him on the way from Moisson to Mantes, he had confided the story of his life. And that still happens today. Told him that at 13 years of age he had been pressed into service on board one of the ci-devant tyrant's ships. That would be, Louis says. That the ship had been captured by English corsairs, and he had been a galley slave until he succeeded in breaking his chains and swimming to shore while the English sloop lay off Ushant. No wonder he hated the whole foul brood of the English. He was their slave for nigh on 20 years. And always he harked back on the golden prize which, he declared, would not be shared up. Each and every man who took a hand in the capture of the English spy would receive his 10,000 livres. 500 gold pieces each, right? I don't know. I heard someone say 500 gold. It feels locked in now. Someone definitely said 500 something. He was listened to with great attention, was the drover, and his words presently carried all the more weight because something very strange came to light. It appeared that the diligence from Moisson with prisoners and escort had made a part of several hours in Mantes. Made a stop of several hours in Mantes. The party only made a fresh start in the late afternoon. That was strange enough in all conscience. What did it mean but that Losey was courting the darkness for his schemes? But there was something more mysterious still. While the diligence stood before the posting inn ready to start, horses pawing and champing, the driver on his box, whip in hand, the 4 troopers who were on guard to right and left of the vehicle, would not allow anyone to come within measurable distance of it. Be it noted that all the blinds of the coach were drawn, so that it was impossible to get a peep at the inside. But two young men, strangers to the neighbourhood, who had since come forward eager to tell their story, more venturesome than others, had crept under the horses' bellies and tried to peer into the interior of the coach. They were almost immediately driven away with blows and curses by the troopers, but not before they had vaguely perceived that there were more than just the prisoners inside the diligence. Yeah, aristocracy good, revolution bad is... yeah, things get complicated. The prisoners were all huddled up in the furthest corner of the vehicle, but there were others. The young men who had had a peep, despite the blows from the troopers, had seen 3 or 4 men at least. They might have been ordinary travellers who had picked up the diligence at Mont. But in that case, why all this secrecy? Yeah, it was a good way to get trampled. Why the drawn blinds, the start in the late afternoon, so that the shades of evening would actually be drawing in when the diligence and its escort ploughed its way through the muddy road of the forest between Mézières and Épinay? Why a feeble escort of only 4 men, when of late, and when the ci-devant tournant d'Agenais were being conveyed to Paris, as many as 8 or 10 picked troopers of the National Guard had ridden beside the diligence? Indeed, the drover from Ancourt was indeed right, indubitably right. Citizen Lauzet and his friend from Paris had entered into a plot, a dastardly, cowardly plot, to cheat the citizens of Moisson of their just share in the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel. There was no doubt that the Scarlet Pimpernel was already captured, and that Lauzet was having him conveyed in secret to Paris. The escort might appear feeble, but there were men inside the diligence who held the English spy bound hand and foot between them, with a cocked pistol at his head. Why, the 2 young strangers who had succeeded in getting a peep at the inside of the diligence quite thought, from the description everyone had of him, that one of the men whom they glimpsed was, in very truth, the Scarlet Pimpernel. He was so tall, they said, so tall that he had to sit almost bent double, otherwise his head would have knocked against the roof of the coach. They are dastards. They were almost prepared to swear also that this tall man's hands were tied together with ropes. After that, as the drover from Ancourt very properly said, any man would be a fool who doubted Lauzet's treachery and cupidity. It was resolved to proceed immediately in his wake, to seize him, wherever he may be, him and any man who had helped him in his treachery. Aye, if he had an army to protect him, he would find that the men of Moisson and Mont were not to be flouted and cheated with impunity. The drover from Ancourt was bribed to take the party in his cart as far as Mézières. He demurred a little at first, seemed to turn crusty and impervious to threats. Eventually he was offered 100 livres out of every man's share if the English spy was captured, and 1 livre if he was not. "Eh bien," he said at last in token of consent, and they all scrambled back into the cart. Ooh, yes, do, Josh, find that out. Hang on, I'm gonna have a sip. We're having a fact break. Wait, when you say our current currency, are you going to do it in like US dollars? Because that's probably what most people watching this will understand. Part 7. Captain Raffet had given the order to dismount, and the troopers sat by the roadside under the trees, making a pretense to rest. Each man, however, had his sabre ready to his hand, and each had seen to the priming of his pistol, while the captain himself, ostensibly, busied himself with examining the fetlock of the mare who had gone lame. Okay, you heard the man, New Zealand dollars. The wind had gone down and the torrential rain had ceased, but there was a thin, mist-like drizzle that soaked through the men's clothing and chilled them to the bone. The tension had become acute. With nerves on edge, the men, those who were in the open as well as those who were cooped up inside the diligence, could do nothing but wait while the time dragged on, and the woods were full of sounds, of the crackling of twigs, the fall of rain-laden leaves, the scrunching of earth under tiny, furtive feet, scurrying away through the undergrowth. The great awkward diligence loomed out of the mist like some gigantic spectral erection. Let's just take a moment to enjoy that. Ah. Oh well, 2015's kind of like now. The great awkward diligence loomed out of the mist like some gigantic spectral erection, peopled by forms that breathed and lived and hardly emitted a sound. Only very occasionally from the interior there came a painful moan, quickly suppressed, from the poor invalid's parched throat. And all at once, something more tangible. A patter of feet, a call, a voice half drowned in the gathering mist. It came way down the road from the direction of Mézières. The men sat up, alert, quivering with excitement, their eyes straining to pierce the thicket, since the sharp bend in the road hid the oncomers from view. Spectral erection. That's what the Holy Ghost is, isn't it? True. The order was to feign inattention, to wait for the attack, lest the wily enemy, scenting a trap, scampered away to safety. Lost my place. And the men waited, very much like greyhounds held in leash, quivering with eagerness, their hot, moist hands grasping sabre and pistol. Second time she's used that. Oh, someone's got to ejaculate. There's too much tension. The while Captain Raffet, as keenly alert as they, carried on a desultory conversation with the driver about the mare's injured fetlock. Vague forms began to detach themselves out of the mist, coming around the bend. Soon they gained volume and substance. The voice still calling gained power and clarity. It was as much as Captain Raffet could do, by muttered word and glance of eye, to keep those human greyhounds of his in check. With the Scarlet Pimpernel perhaps in sight, they were straining on the leash to its breaking point. Everyone's very moist at the moment. It was at that very moment that, throwing all prudence to the wind, the men suddenly raised themselves up on their knees and were on the point of springing to their feet, unable to contain their excitement any longer. That Charles Marie, the loony driver, who had once been a baker's assistant, exclaimed joyfully, "Pardi, if it isn't Citizen Plant, home from the market already." And the next instant the oncoming figure revealed itself as that of an old man, walking along with the aid of a tall stick, and calling at times to his dog or to the half-dozen sheep he was driving before him. This is the cat fake-out scare from horror movies. Citizen Plant was not of a gregarious disposition, nor of an inquisitive one, apparently, for he passed by without a word or glance of curiosity directed at the troopers or the vehicle. All that he did was to nod to the driver as he went by, whilst the men gazed at him, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, as if he had been a spectre. And like a spectre, he seemed to glide past them and out of sight. A minute or two later, the twilight and the mist had swallowed him up with his sheep and his dog, and had smothered his monotonous calls in the veils of the night. A groan of disappointment and impatience rose from the parched throats of the men. The passage of old Plant and his sheep had exasperated their nerves. A moment ago they had felt chilled and cramped. Now their blood was up. Their bodies were in a sweat with the violence of their disappointment. I'm the right way it is. I'm going to get into comedy, but like really lazy early 90s comedy. Already Plant and his sheep were far away. That silence, so full of sounds, had once more descended upon the forest. Again the men waited with eyes and ears strained, their nerves a-tingle, their breathing hard and stertorous. And once more there fell upon their straining ears the sound of human life coming from the direction of Mézières. This time it was the sound of cart wheels creaking through the mud, and of ill-adjusted harness jingling with the movement of wearily plodding horses. There was also from time to time the sound of distant voices, a harsh call or uproarious laugh suddenly stilled, as if in response to a peremptory warning. Nothing in truth to suggest the furtive methods of the English adventurers. It seemed more like a party of farmers coming home from market. I really hope everyone can see where this is going, because the fake out with the old man was so good. The troopers were on the alert, of course, but not quite so keenly, perhaps, as they were before their disappointment over Citizen Plant's passage across the scene. But a minute or two later, a quick word from their captain brought them sharply to attention. The cart had obviously come to a halt, but a lusty shout now rang through the stillness of the night, and there was a general sound of scampering and of running, mingled with calls of excitement and encouragement. I love how often she used the word scampering. A few minutes of tense expectation. Then suddenly, round the bend, a band of 10 or a dozen men came into view, armed with miscellaneous weapons. At sight of the diligence, they gave a wild shout of triumph, brandished their weapons, and rushed to the attack. "Attention, citizen soldiers!" Raffaele commanded hastily. "Do not shoot unless you are obliged. But if you must, shoot low. We must have some of these English spies alive if we can." Sweden is never far away. Hardly were the words out of his mouth when, with a renewed shout of triumph, the band of young ruffians threw themselves like a pack of enraged puppies on the soldiers, whilst others made straight for the diligence. But before they had gone within 20 metres of it, the captain gave the quick word of command that brought the men of the gendarmerie out of the coach, pistols in hand, ready for the fight. The attacking party, however, held no laggards either. Egged on by the drover of Ancourt, and still shouting wildly, they rushed on the men of the gendarmerie as they scrambled out of the coach. Numbers being about equal on either side, the men coming out one by one were at a great disadvantage. Almost as soon as they had set foot to the ground, they were fallen on with fist or sabre, and soon the confusion was complete. You could add that to any point in my day, and it would make sense. And soon the confusion was complete. "What the devil's game is this?" Raffaele shouted hoarsely. For in an instant he found himself at grips, not with the mysterious Scarlet Pimpernel, but with Gaspard, the son of the butcher at Moisson, whom he had known ever since they had been ragamuffins together. And Gaspard was as strong as some of the bullocks his father was wont to kill. Before Raffaele could recover from the surprise of this wholly unexpected turn of events, Gaspard had brought his heavy fist crashing down on his whilom friend's skull. Whilom isn't a word we use much anymore. It's so vexing. "It means," Gaspard shouted, mad with fury, "that thou'rt a traitor, and that I'll teach thee to help cheat thy friends." Nor could Raffaele argue after that. He had need of all his faculties to defend himself against this young ox. He had drawn his pistol, true, but Gaspard's iron-like hand had closed around his wrist, and the fight soon degenerated to fisticuffs. The troopers fared no better either. Though they had been prepared for an attack, they were not prepared for this furious onslaught made upon them by their friends. Name of a dog! What did it all mean? For they were all friends, these madmen, every one of them, young men from Moisson and Lannoy and Mont. There was Francois, the mercer of the Rue Grande, and Jacques, whose father kept the tavern at the sign of the Black Swan, and Paul, whose mother was the best washerwoman in Mont. And words flew round to the accompaniment of thumping blows. Jacques, art thou mad or drunk? Aki, thy father will beat thee for this escapade. Name of a name, but you'll all get something for this night's work. Some of these things are like swear words that aren't really swear words. You know how like saying bloody something or other is derived from saying God's blood as an oath. Well, name of God is kind of an oath. And then Jeezy Pete's instead of saying Jesus Christ. So, nom d'un nom, name of a name instead of saying name of God is something that you can write in a book. Art thou mad or drunk? Name of a name, but you'll all get something for this night's work. And all the while blows were raining fast and furious. Fast and Furious 69. Blows. It's raining blows. There was no lust to kill, only wild enthusiasm for a fight. A desire to be avenged on friends who had aided that rascal Lozé to cheat the men of the district out of the golden prize. Give up the English spies, or I'll squeeze the breath out of thy throat. This from Gaspard, the butcher's son, who had felled his friend Raffet to the ground and rolled over and over in the mud with him, the two men snarling at one another and biting and scratching like a couple of angry dogs. Zoons! God's wounds. Absolutely. Had they all gone mad, these men of Moisson? The issue of the struggle might have remained longer in the balance, had not Raffet just then freed his right hand from the iron grip of Gaspard and discharged his pistol into his Wallon comrade's leg. Erstwhile, I guess. Gaspard rolled over onto his back with a groan and a curse. Traitor, thou hast murdered me, he cried, while the blood flowed freely out of his thigh. I also say that every time anybody does anything to me. Is this milk trim? It's not. Traitor, thou hast murdered me. Splud, you'll not hear me. Exactly. They're so good. But the one pistol shot had the effect of sobering the combatants. Fiddlesticks means Christ died in vain? Yeah, I'm buying it. Both the swear and the concept. Sorry. The aggressors had pistols too, and sabers, but in their excitement had forgotten how to use them. The sudden report, however, brought the soldiers back to a sense of discipline, wakened them, as it were, from their surprise, and in a moment gave them a decided advantage over the undisciplined attacking party. This wild fisticuffs could not go on. It was unworthy of the soldiers of the Republic. They were being attacked by a band of irresponsible young jackanapes, whom the devil himself must for the nonce have deprived of reason. But it remained for the picked men of the rural gendarmerie to teach them that such madness could not remain unpunished, and friend or foe, he who attacks a soldier of the Republic must suffer for his wantonness. Far be it from the chronicler of these events to pretend that all these thoughts did surge clearly in the heads of the troopers. What is a fact is that from the moment their captain discharged a pistol into Gaspard's thigh, They became masters of the situation. The fight between soldiers and citizens assumed its just proportions. There were a few pistol shots, some saber thrusts, a good deal of groaning and cursing, while more than one stalwart, besides Gaspar, rolled over in the mud. Devil's jackanapes. The fight had lasted less than 10 minutes. When the first rush on the diligence was made, the twilight was already fading into dusk. Now, when the last shot had been fired, and the last of the hotheads had cried for mercy, dusk was slowly yielding to the darkness of the night. Raffet called the soldiers to attention. They were still panting with excitement. No, I was trying to come up with something about how I'm really old, and I'd call my gang Grand Tifa. No. No. They were still panting with excitement. Some of them were dizzy from the blows dealt freely on their skulls. One or two showed a bunged eye or a bleeding lip, but none of them was seriously hurt. The hotheads from Moisson and Mont had not fared quite so well. Some of them had received a charge of shot in leg, arm, or shoulder, and were lying groaning or half conscious on the ground. Those two had escaped with minor hurts that were on their knees, held down by the heavy hand of a trooper. They did not in truth represent an edifying spectacle, with their faces streaming with blood and perspiration, their clothes torn, their shirt sleeves hanging in rags, their hair wet and lank, hanging before their eyes. Raffet ordered them to be mustered up. His sharp glance ran over them as they stood all crouched together in a line. Oaths of Satan. I ought to have the lot of you summarily shot, Raffet said sternly to them after he had inspected his men and seen that victory had not cost them dear. Yes, shot, he reiterated, for interfering with the soldiers of the Republic in the exercise of their duty. And I will do it too, he went on after a moment's pause, unless you tell me now the meaning of this abominable escapade. You know it well, citizen Raffet, Paul, the washerwoman's son, said, still breathless with excitement and with a savage oath, when you joined hands with that traitor Lozet to cheat us all of what was our due. Joined hands with Lozet? What the devil do you mean? Raffet queried, frowning. In what did I join hands with Lozet? In capturing the English spy and getting the reward for yourselves when it rightly belonged to us. The reward, Raffet retorted dryly, will be for whosoever may be lucky to get the English spy. For the moment, I imagine that if he meant to attack us tonight, your folly has scared him. The noise you made would keep any brigand out of the way. There's no use lying to us, Raffet, one of the others retorted somewhat incoherently. It was Francois who spoke this time, the mercer from the Rue Grande, and he had always been noted for his eloquence. It's very hard for me to say the R sounds in French because my new meds are making my mouth really dry. That's why I'm not good at whatever I'm doing. It's always the new meds. And the way to do that is to make sure that you're always taking something new. Then nothing's your fault. No use lying to us, Raffet. You raised your hands against us citizens of the Republic who came here to avenge an unpardonable wrong. And let me tell you that 'tis you who will suffer for this night's work. Ah, sir! Raffet broke in savagely, for his temper was still up. How long are you going to talk in riddles? In truth, it's the devil that has deprived you of your senses. What is all this talk about the English spy? Who told you we were after him? And why would you hinder us from doing our duty? We know, Francois retorted, striving to appear calm and full of dignity, that not only were you after the English spy, But we know that you captured him in our district, and that you have got him in the diligence yonder, and are conveying him to Paris, where you and your friends will share 10,000 livres, which by rights should have belonged to us men of the district where the spies were captured. What gibberish is this? I tell you that not only have we not got the English spy, but owing to your senseless folly, we are not likely to get him now. I say that the English spy is in your diligence, Francois exclaimed, and pointed dramatically at the old vehicle, which stood like a huge, solid mass, heavier and darker than the surrounding gloom. Oh, some of us have seen him, I tell you. And his companions, even those who were in the sorriest plight, nodded in assent. But Raphael swallowed his temper now. What was the use of arguing with these fools? He would have thought it beneath his dignity to give them ocular demonstration that the diligence now only held 3 miserable aristos. But the trouble was what to do with this crowd. Raphael counted them over. There were 8 of them, and 4 of these were helpless with wounds in the legs. Somehow at the first rush, Raphael thought there'd be more like a dozen young ruffians, and he had a distinct recollection of a big clumsy fellow who seemed to be the prime mover in this senseless escapade. But no doubt he, as well as 1 or 2 others, had had the good sense to take to their heels, and Raphael had certainly no intention of scouring the woods for them. On the other hand, he had every intention of seeing those that remained well punished for their folly. He did not wish to drag them along with him to Epony. It was another 4 kilometres and more, and the first part of the journey would still be through the forest. With the gathering darkness, the coach horses would have to be led by men carrying lanterns. Pondering a moment over the future of his prisoners, Raphael had a sudden inspiration. Who drove the cart that brought you all hither? He demanded. A man from Lannoy, Paul, the washerwoman's son, replied. Then he shall take you back to Mont the way you came. You would not dare, one of the others protested. Raphael, however, had already turned to his corporal of gendarmerie. Citizen corporal, he said, take these rascals as far as the cart which brought them thither. It must have come to a halt somewhere near the bottom of the hill. Let 2 of your men go with them to Mont, and there hand them over to the deputy commissary. Order the owner of the cart to drive them, on pain of severe punishment if he refuses. Take 1 of the lanterns with you. It will be needed, as the road will be pitch dark before they are well on their way. And stay, you have some stout cord inside the diligence. We were going to use it on the English spy. Now it will serve to bind these rogues together 2 by 2, lest they try some more of their tricks on you. Those who are hurt can lie in the bottom of the cart. Citizen Raphael! Francois the mercer raised his voice in final impotent protest. You will answer to the state for this outrage on her citizens. But Raphael was no longer in a mind to listen. The corporal had sent 1 of the men to find the length of rope which was inside the diligence, and was to have served for binding up the English spies, and now it would be used on a lot of jackanapes on their homeward journey to Mont. Protests and curses were indeed in vain, and the soldiers, whose tempers had not yet cooled down, were none too gentle with the rope. Raphael, in the meanwhile, had called 1 of the men of the gendarmerie to him. Ride, citizen soldier, he commanded, as fast as you can to Epony. I don't know how to pronounce it in French, I'm sorry. You will find the citizen commissary and his friend from Paris at the posting inn. Tell them just what has occurred, and that I am sending the pack of miscreants back to Mont for punishment. Tell them also that this senseless piece of folly has not left us unprepared for attack by the English spies, though we have not much more hope in that direction now. We shall be on the road again within a quarter of an hour, but we'll have to walk the horses practically all the way, so do not expect to be in Epony for another 2 hours at least. Then, at last, did comparative silence fall upon the scene, where a brief while ago deafening shouts and tumultuous melee had roused the woodland echoes. Only the prisoners now were heard groaning and cursing. Ah! Fuck! The courier had ridden away bearing the unwelcome news to Lozay and his friend from Paris. The men who were not busy with the prisoners were looking to their horses or their accoutrements, while Raffet stood by, observant and grim. And suddenly, right out of the darkness, there came the sound of agonizing calls for help. Help, help, I'm being oppressed. What was that? Raffet queried, straining his ears to listen. Help, came from the distance. And again, help, ho! And curse you, why don't you come? Both things we've all heard. And with it all, the now familiar sound of men fighting and shouting. Not so very far away either. A couple of 100 meters, perhaps, just on the other side of the bend. Were it not for the thicket and darkness, a man could cut his way through to where those shouts came from in a couple of minutes. There was a shout right outside my door. It was Flora shouting. And cursing, probably. Help! Help! One of the prisoners broke into a harsh laugh. It's Citizen Lozay, I wager, he said, and his friend from Paris. Citizen Lozay! Raffet exclaimed. What in hell do you mean? Ooh, swearing. Well, Paul, the washerwoman's son, replied, still laughing, and forgetting his sorry plight and the excellence of the joke. We found those two ambling on the bridle path, on their way to Epony, ready no doubt to seize the largest share of reward for the capture of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Great God! And so we seized them both, Francois the mercer rejoined, and did to them what you are doing now to us. Gave them a good hiding, then bound them together with ropes and threw them in the bottom of a cart. Name of a dog! It's French, Phil. What the fuck? And no doubt, came a high-pitched voice from among the group of prisoners, the English spies have found them and... Malediction! But Raffet got no further. Astonishment, not unmixed with terror, rendered him speechless. The Scarlet Pimpernel, ye gods! And the chief of section and his friend at the mercy of that fiend! Even now his straining ears seemed to perceive, through those calls for help, a triumphant battle cry in a barbaric tongue. Here, he cried to the troopers, 2 of you are sufficient to bring those rascals along, and you, corporal, and 2 men, come with me. Citizen Lozay and his friend are being murdered even now. The way they keep referring to Chauvelin as Citizen Lozay's friend is like he's a cousin who turned up at Christmas with his boyfriend, but your grandma can't accept it, so everyone just calls him your cousin's friend. Is this universal? Never mind. He hurried down the road, followed by the corporal and the 2 men of the gendarmerie, whilst those that were left behind saw to it that the perpetrators of all this additional outrage and of all this pother were duly garroted and started on their way. They don't mean garroting the way we mean it now. They're just tying them up. To them, Raffet shouted a final, 3 of you remain to guard the prisoners and make ready for an immediate start when we return. Then he disappeared round the bend in the road. Let me see how much longer the story is. Because we might have to go into part 3. This is not a short story. Good Lord. Yeah, we may need a part 3 or even a part 4. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Let me get back to where I was. I had no idea the story was this long when I started reading it. I'm glad though. It's still good. Damned elusive Pimpernel. Thank you guys so much for being here and hanging out and enjoying the incredible drama. Oh, it all come. Time is a flat circle, isn't it? Yes. What satisfaction canst thou have tonight? Let's say goodnight till it be morrow. Hey? Hey? Thank you guys. I will see you tomorrow. You on a pimp hanger. Well, I hate leaving you on a cliff, Pimper, but you know, soz. Okay, bye, you guys. Bye. See you tomorrow. Be good to each other. Or don't. I'm not your boss.